I had been on the road for most of my life, and my truck had become the only place that ever felt close to home. I was used to long highways, empty desert roads, dark mountain passes, cold nights when the world felt quiet and slow, and early mornings when I could see the sky change colors while the rest of the world slept. I worked alone, I ate alone, and I slept alone inside the small space behind my seat. I thought I understood loneliness better than most people, and I also thought I understood fear because I had driven through snowstorms, ice roads, broken bridges, and long stretches of highway where there were no buildings, no houses, no gas stations, nothing but dirt and trees and old road signs. But I realized on one long haul that there were still things that could make me feel smaller than I ever had before, things that did not need to be supernatural to feel strange or heavy or dangerous. I learned that fear could grow slowly, mile after mile, in simple places where nothing looked wrong at first. It started on a night when I was hauling a long flatbed trailer loaded with steel beams across a wide rural area. The load felt heavy but stable, and the road was quiet and open, with nothing around me except dark fields and small hills. The air outside looked dry and empty, and the sky had no moon, only a faint dull glow of stars that I could barely see through thin clouds. I had been driving for hours, and the world felt like it was shrinking down to nothing but my headlights, the road lines, and the faint hum of the engine. I could feel the vibration of the steering wheel through my hands, and the steady pain in my lower back from sitting too long. My eyes felt tired, but I was still alert, still focused, still counting the miles and exits and small warn signs I passed. I reached a stretch of highway that ran through a series of low hills and old farmland. There were long dirt roads that cut off into darkness, broken fences, rusted tractors sitting in empty fields, and trees that grew in uneven clusters near dry creek beds. I noticed that this part of the highway felt different. There were fewer lights, fewer signs of life. The road felt older and quieter, like nobody used it unless they really had to. My GPS showed a long straight path with no towns for many miles, just a few rest stops and service roads. I told myself that it was just another quiet stretch, something I had seen many times before, nothing unusual, just empty land and silence. But after a while, I noticed something strange about the road ahead. The shoulder looked damaged in places, like chunks of asphalt had broken away. The guardrails were bent and scraped, and I saw black marks on the pavement that looked like old breaking scars. Some of them stretched long and crooked across the lanes like someone had lost control more than once. I kept driving and tried not to think about it too much, but the more distance I covered, the more signs of accidents I saw. Bent posts, scrapes on the barriers, pieces of broken plastic from old vehicles left on the side, cracked reflector poles leaning sideways. It looked like a place where bad things had happened more than once, a place where the road itself seemed tired and worn from impact after impact. The night felt heavier the deeper I went. The hills blocked the horizon, and the darkness pressed closer to the edges of my windshield. I kept my hands tight on the wheel and focused on the white lines. I could feel the road surface changing under my tires, small dips, uneven patches, slight shifts that made the trailer sway even when I drove slow and careful. I knew how dangerous a heavy load could be on damaged pavement, so I kept my speed low and steady, watching every curve and slope. Then I saw something far ahead in the darkness, just outside the reach of my headlights. It was not a person, not a car, not an animal. It was just something faint, something that did not look like part of the road. When I got closer, I saw that it was a broken-down truck sitting partly on the shoulder and partly on the lane. It looked old, dirty, and abandoned. Its rear lights were dead, its front hood was lifted slightly, and there were no hazard triangles, no signs of repair, no movement inside. I slowed down and carefully drove around it, giving it as much space as the narrow lanes allowed. As I passed, I looked at it for a brief second. The windows were dark. The inside looked empty. The whole thing looked like it had been left there for days or weeks. But what bothered me was that there were no toe marks, no footprints, no signs of recent activity around it. It was just there, like it had been placed and forgotten. I felt a strange heaviness in my chest, a sense that something about this stretch of road was wrong in a way I could not explain with logic. It was not fear of ghosts or anything supernatural. It was a human kind of fear, the kind that grows when something does not match how things are supposed to be. I kept driving, but the feeling followed me. The road grew darker, the hills closed in tighter, and the air started to feel colder even though the heater inside the cab was on. The highway shoulders narrowed, and the pavement lines looked faded and cracked. I could tell this part of the road did not get much maintenance. It felt forgotten, like a place people avoided when they could choose another route. I passed another broken vehicle. This time a small car pushed deep into the dirt off the shoulder, with weeds growing around the tires like it had been there for months. The paint was dull, parts were missing, and the windshield had a long crack across it. Again, no signs of anyone returning for it. No tape, no notes, no stickers from authorities. Just another abandoned shell of something that once moved. I felt uneasy, but I kept going because there was nowhere to turn around for miles, and I still had a schedule to follow. I reminded myself that roads like this existed everywhere. Some routes just fell out of use. Some accidents never got fully cleaned up. But even as I tried to rationalize it, the feeling of isolation kept growing. The world outside my cab felt empty in a way I had not felt before. Not peaceful empty, but heavy empty, like the land itself had stopped caring. After some time, fog began to form ahead of me, thin at first, then slowly thicker. It rolled up from the low valleys and dry creek beds and drifted across the highway like pale smoke. My headlights lit it up in wide gray beams, and my visibility dropped to a narrow tunnel. I slowed down even more, keeping my truck straight and steady, counting the broken reflector posts as I passed them one by one. Inside the cab, everything felt smaller. The sound of the engine seemed louder, the hum of the tires rougher. I could hear every small sound, every small rattle from the trailer. My body felt tense, my shoulders tight, my hands stiff around the wheel. I was alone in the middle of nowhere with a massive load, poor road conditions, thick fog, and a strange quiet that made every minute feel longer than it should. Then the road began to curve downhill. The slope was not steep at first, but it was long, drawn out, and uneven. The pavement dipped in places, and my trailer shifted with every bump. I could feel the weight pushing forward, pressing into the cab, pressing into my spine. I stayed calm and controlled the brakes carefully, keeping everything gradual, steady, predictable. I knew that one sharp move at the wrong time could lead to disaster. As I descended the hill, I noticed more dark marks on the road, more long scars from heavy braking. They were everywhere across both lanes, twisted, sharp, frantic. I imagined trucks losing control here, trailers swinging, loads sliding, drivers fighting the wheel while their vehicles pulled them forward. The image of that stayed inside my head, and I could almost feel it in my own hands as the road kept dropping. The fog thickened as I reached the bottom of the hill. There were no lights, no signs, no houses, no buildings, nothing but the cracked road and the darkness pressing against the glass around me. My eyes burned from staring forward so hard. My heartbeat felt slow and heavy in my chest, loud enough that I could feel it in my neck and ears. The world outside my headlights did not exist anymore. There was only what I could see and what I imagined might be there beyond it. Then I saw something on the right side of the road. At first it just looked like a shape in the fog, something low and wide. As I got closer, I realized it was another truck, or what was left of one. It was down in a shallow ditch, crushed and twisted, with its trailer bent and split open, the steel frame exposed like bones under torn skin. The cab was smashed in, the windshield shattered inward, and the doors were twisted at strange angles. It did not look recent, but it also did not look very old. There was no tape or marking, nothing to show it had been investigated or removed. It just sat there in silence, like a grave no one had ever visited. I kept driving, but that image stayed inside my head. I could not stop thinking about how it must have happened. Maybe the brakes failed. Maybe the road collapsed. Maybe the driver lost control in fog just like this. I imagined the moment the truck left the road, the helpless sliding, the weight of the trailer pushing it down the slope. I imagined the fear in the last seconds when the driver realized there was nothing left to do. The thought filled my chest and made the road in front of me feel even more real and fragile. The fog grew thicker still, and the road narrowed even more as it crossed a small bridge. The guardrails were bent and scraped, and I saw pieces of metal and broken reflector glass scattered across the shoulder. Underneath the bridge, I glimpsed a dry creek bed filled with rocks, dark shadows, and quiet stillness. The bridge felt old, thin, and weak, like it had been hit too many times and was just waiting for another mistake to finish it. I moved slowly, inch by inch, keeping the truck straight, keeping my breath steady, feeling every second stretch out like a long string. The trailer creaked behind me, the weight shifting as I crossed the bridge. I could feel the metal frame under the asphalt, the hollowness beneath, the echo of my own movement inside the structure. When I finally reached the other side, a small wave of relief moved through me, but it did not last long. The fog swallowed everything again, and ahead I saw nothing but a gray wall. The road climbed slightly uphill this time, but the surface looked worse than before. Cracks ran across it like thin veins, and patches of uneven asphalt rose and sank under my tires. I could feel the trailer shifting in slow, heavy motions, and I knew that if I lost control here, there was nowhere safe to go. The shoulders were narrow and rough, the drop-offs uncertain, and the visibility nearly gone. I kept going because there was no other choice. Mile after mile, the road remained damaged, lonely, and silent. I began to feel like I had entered a place people avoided for a reason, a place where drivers only passed through once and never returned. I thought about all the abandoned vehicles I had seen, all the braking marks, all the twisted metal. It painted a picture inside my head of a road that took more than it gave back. After what felt like a very long time, the fog began to thin. The air opened up, and I could finally see more than a few yards ahead. The land flattened out, the hills faded away, and the highway stretched forward into open space again. The pavement grew smoother, the lines brighter, the shoulders wider. It looked like normal highway again, like the world had returned to something stable and familiar. But even as the road improved, the feeling inside me did not fade. I realized that the fear I felt was not only about the accidents or the dangerous curves or the abandoned trucks. It was about how quiet everything had been, how forgotten that stretch of highway felt, how easy it would be for someone to disappear there without anyone knowing for a long time. The world kept moving somewhere far away, but that place stayed still, holding every broken piece of metal and every silent wreck as if they were never meant to leave. I drove until I reached a large rest area far beyond that section of road. I parked my truck and sat still for a long time, feeling the ache in my back, the stiffness in my shoulders, the shaking in my arms that I had not noticed while driving. I listened to the ticking sounds of the engine cooling, the faint hum of other trucks in the distance, the quiet rustle of wind moving through nearby trees. The world felt normal again, but I could not shake the heavy feeling in my chest. I thought about how close I had been to losing control on those damaged slopes, how one mistake could have made me part of the quiet wreckage on that road. I thought about the drivers who never left that place, about their final minutes, about the silence that swallowed their machines and left them there like forgotten marks on the land. I understood then that fear did not always come from strange or unreal things. Sometimes it came from real roads, real slopes, real weight, real danger, waiting quietly in dark places where nobody watched. In the end, I finished my haul and reached my destination safely, but that night stayed inside my mind long after the job was done. Every time I passed a quiet stretch of broken highway, every time I saw abandoned vehicles on the side of the road, every time the fog rolled in and the world shrank down to my headlights and the long white lines, I remembered that lonely section of road and how small I felt while driving through it. I realized that the scariest thing I ever faced was not something unreal or imagined. It was the simple truth that the road does not care who you are, how long you have driven, or how strong you think you are. It keeps going with or without you, and if you make the wrong move in the wrong place, it will leave you behind in silence, like all the others who never made it through. I have been a long-haul truck driver for many years, and most nights on the road feel the same. Long empty highways, steady engine noise, and miles of darkness stretching in every direction. I always thought I understood the road and the kind of fear it could bring. I thought fear came from weather, broken brakes, bad tires, or falling asleep at the wheel. I did not realize that real fear could come from silence, from small details that do not make sense, from something that feels human but wrong in a slow and quiet way. This happened on a run through a stretch of desert highway late at night. When the air was dry, the road was empty, and I believed I was alone. I was hauling a loaded trailer with building materials, heading toward a distribution yard several states away. The route was mostly straight highways with small towns spread far apart. I planned to drive through the night to avoid traffic and heat. The sky was clear when I started. The road ahead looked endless, with faint lights from faraway gas stations sometimes showing in the distance before disappearing again. My cab smelled like old coffee and engine oil. I kept my hands tight on the wheel because I had already driven many hours and I wanted to stay sharp. The hum of the tires on the road made my head heavy, but I fought the tired feeling. I checked my mirrors often because that is habit. I did not expect to see much behind me on that empty stretch. For a while, there was nothing but darkness and the faint red glow of my own trailer lights. Then, sometime after midnight, I noticed a pair of headlights far behind me. They were small at first, just two dots that seemed to float on the empty road. I did not think much of it at the start. Vehicles come and go. People travel at night all the time. But the headlights stayed the same distance behind me for a strange amount of time, almost like they were matching my speed on purpose. I pressed the accelerator a little to see if they would fall back. The lights stayed the same distance. I slowed down slightly to see if they would pass. They slowed too. I kept my eyes on the mirrors longer than usual. The white beams of the car behind me lit the back edge of my trailer now and then, flashing across the reflective tape. The desert around us looked even darker compared to that bright glare. The space between us stayed perfect, not too close, not too far, just enough to feel like someone was holding position behind me. There was something uncomfortable about that. It was not illegal. It was not dramatic. It was just steady and strange. The road was wide open. They could have gone around me at any moment. There was no oncoming traffic. The lane next to me was clear, but the car stayed there, constant, patient, careful. The longer it went on, the heavier the feeling in my chest grew. I focused on the lines on the road and tried to tell myself it was nothing. Maybe the driver was tired. Maybe they were nervous about passing a big truck at night. I tried to believe that explanation even though it did not feel right. The desert air outside was cold and dry. The wind pushed against the side of my trailer and made a soft shaking sound through the metal. The smell of dust came through the vents. I could sense how alone this stretch of road really was. No houses, no buildings, no streetlights, just open land and a long black highway. If something went wrong out there, help would be far away. That thought sat in the back of my mind as I kept glancing at the mirrors. After some time, I reached a slow uphill grade. My truck lost a little speed. The headlights behind me grew larger as the car moved a bit closer. My heartbeat picked up because it looked like they were about to finally pass. But instead, they moved close enough to clearly light the back of my trailer, then backed off again and returned to the same perfect distance as before. It looked intentional, not aggressive, not friendly, just controlled. I tried to ignore it, but it started to feel personal, like I was being studied. Every small sound in the cab suddenly mattered. The vibration of the steering wheel, the rattle of items in the storage compartment, the light buzz of the dash panel. My breathing became slow and heavy. I could feel sweat on my back even though the air inside was cool. After another long stretch of road, I approached a rest area. It was one of those small desert stops with only a few parking spaces, a single restroom building, and a couple of dim lamps casting weak circles of light on the pavement. I decided to pull in, both to stretch and to see what the car would do. I turned on my indicator and began slowing down. The headlights behind me slowed again, staying right where they had been, like an echo of my speed. I rolled into the rest area and guided the truck into a parking space near the far side. The gravel popped under the tires. The engine idled with a low, steady growl. I watched the entrance in my mirror. The car approached, its headlights filling the road just outside the rest stop. For a moment, it looked like it would pass by on the highway, but instead it turned in behind me. The headlights swept across the lot, Then the vehicle stopped several spaces away, angled slightly, not fully parked, just sitting there with the engine still running and its lights still shining. I could not see the person inside. The glare made the windshield black. The car did not move any closer. It did not turn off the engine. It just sat there, like it was waiting. I did not get out of the truck right away. I sat in the driver's seat with my hands resting on the wheel and my heart beating faster than before. The rest area was completely silent except for my engine and theirs. The lamps above the lot flickered faintly. The restroom building stood dark and empty, with no sound from inside. The sky above was full of stars, but it made the place feel even more exposed, not safer. I stayed inside my cab for several minutes, pretending to check my logbook and gauges, but I was really just watching that car without turning my head too much. The driver did not step out. No doors opened, no movement at all, just that steady idle, a faint vibration in the air, like the world was stuck in place. Eventually, I decided I needed to use the restroom. I also needed to show I was not scared, even though I was. I waited a few seconds more to see if the car would react. It did not. I turned off my headlights but kept my parking lights on, then carefully climbed down from the cab. The gravel crunched under my boots. The desert air felt colder on my face than before, and I could smell the faint scent of fuel and dust. I walked slowly toward the restroom building. I did not look directly at the car, but I could feel it behind me. I could sense the weight of someone's eyes. The sound of their idling engine followed me like a small shadow. The restroom door was heavy and squeaked when I pushed it. The inside was empty, echoing, and smelled like cleaning chemicals and old water. The light above the sink flickered. While I stood there washing my hands, I noticed how quiet everything felt. No footsteps, no movement outside, just silence and my own breathing. I dried my hands and stood for a moment longer, trying to decide whether to stay in there or leave. Standing in that empty room felt wrong too. I did not want to be trapped inside a small space while someone waited outside where I could not see them. I stepped back out into the cold air. The car was still there, in the same spot, engine running, headlights now dimmed but not off. I walked back to my truck at a steady pace, not fast, not slow. I climbed inside, shut the door, and immediately locked it. The sound of the lock clicking felt too small for the size of the fear in my chest. I waited. A minute passed, then two. The car finally turned off its engine and lights. The darkness around it grew thick. I could only see its outline under the faint rest stop lamps. No door opened. No one stepped out. I scanned every shadow around the lot. My mouth felt dry. My hands trembled a little on the steering wheel. After a while, I decided to leave. I did not want to sleep there. I started my engine, the deep sound of the diesel cutting through the silence. As soon as I began to roll forward, the car turned its engine back on too, like it was responding to my movement. I merged back onto the highway, and within seconds I saw the same headlights appear behind me again, sliding into that same perfect distance as before. I felt a heavy pressure in my chest now. This was not a coincidence anymore. It had gone on too long, too exact, too patient. The empty desert highway stretched ahead like a long dark tunnel. The sound of the road beneath me felt louder, harsher, like it was scraping at my nerves. The car continued to follow for many more miles. Sometimes it drifted a bit to one side, then back, but it never passed and never fell away. I began to notice small things. How its headlights seemed slightly uneven, how one beam pointed a little higher, how the front bumper looked scratched when the light caught it on a curve. I memorized every detail because some instinct in me felt like I might need that information later. The highway reached a low, long curve through rocky terrain. There were no exits for many miles. The land on both sides of the road looked rough and empty. The wind picked up and pushed against the side of my truck again, making the trailer sway slightly. I tightened my grip on the wheel and kept watching the mirrors. Then the car moved closer. Not fast, not sudden, but steady, creeping forward until it was just a short distance from the back of my trailer. It stayed there, tailing me closely on a dark stretch that felt far away from everything. I imagined what would happen if it nudged my trailer or tried to force me into a mistake. I could feel the weight of the cargo behind me, the way the truck would react if anything threw it off balance. The fear now was not loud or panicked. It was slow and heavy, like a weight pressing down on my ribs. I could feel every muscle in my arms and shoulders tightening. I kept thinking about how empty the road was, how nobody else was out there to see what was happening. After what felt like forever, the car finally drifted back to the same distance as before. It stayed there as I climbed another hill and rolled through another stretch of darkness. I began to feel like the night would never end, like I was trapped in a loop with this silent vehicle behind me. Eventually, far ahead, I saw the faint glow of a small town. Not a big city, just a cluster of lights around a junction with a few buildings, maybe a truck stop or a service area. The sight of those lights made my chest loosen just a little. I decided that as soon as I reached that area, I would pull into a well-lit place with cameras and other people nearby, even if it cost me time. As I approached the town, the car behind me slowed down slightly. The distance grew larger. For a brief moment, I thought maybe whoever was following me did not want to enter an area where others might see them. The road widened. Streetlights appeared along the side of the highway. I signaled and moved toward the exit with the truck stop sign. The car did not follow. In my mirror, I watched it continue forward on the main road, shrinking into the distance until its headlights became small dots again, and then disappeared completely into the darkness. I pulled into the truck stop lot, guided the truck into a parking space near the building, and turned off the engine. The parking lot was brightly lit. Other trucks sat nearby, engines humming softly. The smell of fuel and warm asphalt filled the air. The normal noise and light made it feel safer, but the fear in my chest did not fade completely. I stayed in the cab for a long time, thinking about everything that had happened. The steady following, the rest area, the engine starting when mine did, the way the car matched my speed perfectly. Nothing supernatural, nothing dramatic, just quiet, patient behavior that felt calculated and wrong. I kept replaying every mile in my head, trying to understand the reason. There was nothing in my trailer worth stealing, just heavy building materials. No valuable electronics. No cargo that would attract the kind of organized crime I sometimes heard about from other drivers. There was no reason for someone to target me specifically. Yet someone had followed me for miles in a way that made no sense if they were just another driver on the road. I slept in the cab that night, but it was not real sleep. I kept waking up and checking the mirrors, even though the lot around me was safe. Every small sound outside made my heart jump. A passing engine, footsteps on gravel, a closing truck door. My mind connected each sound back to the quiet headlights on the empty highway. The next morning, in daylight, the world looked normal again. Trucks came and went. The sky was bright. The air was warm and dry instead of cold and sharp. The fear from the night felt almost distant, but not gone. It sat somewhere deep inside my chest like a small stone. I checked my trailer, my tires, my fuel cap. Nothing was damaged or disturbed. Everything was exactly as it should be. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that the most frightening part was not what happened. It was what did not happen. There was no confrontation, no crime I could clearly point to, no proof of danger, just behavior that felt wrong enough to make my instincts scream without leaving any trace behind. I finished my route and delivered the load as planned, but something changed in me after that night. Now, when I drive through long stretches of darkness, I watch every vehicle behind me more closely than before. When a car holds its distance for too long, my chest tightens, and I remember the silent engine at the rest area, the patient headlights on the empty desert road, the feeling of being alone but not truly alone. The ending to the story is simple and real. Nothing dramatic happened in a single moment. I was not attacked. I did not crash. I reached my destination just like any other job. But that night changed the way I understand fear. I learned that fear does not always come from loud or sudden danger. Sometimes it comes from slow, careful movements that never fully reveal their purpose. Sometimes the scariest thing on the road is the feeling that someone is watching you quietly, following you through the dark with patience and intent, and you never find out why. That uncertainty stayed with me long after the drive was over, and it still follows me every time I look in my mirrors at night, and see a pair of headlights that refuses to pass. I spent most of my adult life on the road, moving freight from one end of the country to the other, living inside the cab of my truck more than inside any house or apartment. I always thought I understood lonely highways, dark nights, cold air blowing through cracked windows, the steady hum of tires on rough asphalt, and the strange way time feels when you are many miles from anyone else. I thought I understood fear too, the normal kind of trucker feels when the weather turns bad or when the engine starts making a sound you do not want to hear. But what happened on one long haul changed the way I look at empty roads forever, because it was not about storms or broken machines. It was about how real danger can hide in plain sight, how a normal road can become a place where every small sound feels sharp and every mile feels heavier than the last. The trip started like many others. I was carrying a load of packaged food from one warehouse to another, heading through long stretches of open land, flat fields, small towns that seemed almost empty at night, and miles of highway that felt endless. The schedule was tight, so I planned to drive through most of the night to stay ahead. The sky was dark, the air was cool, and there was almost no traffic. I liked that quiet at first. It made the road feel smooth and simple, like there was nothing waiting ahead except more pavement and yellow lines. The dashboard lights glowed faintly, the engine vibrated under my feet, and the trailer shifted slightly every time the wind pushed against it. I remember how the road looked under my headlights, gray and pale, stretching forward into the dark like a tunnel without walls. The land around me was flat for miles, with fields and patches of trees that looked like black shapes. I could see old fences along the side of the road, broken in some places, and small dirt tracks leading off into empty spaces. There were no houses close by, no streetlights, no gas stations for many miles. It felt like the world had shrunk down to only my truck, the road ahead, and the dark around me. After a few hours, I noticed a small road sign that warned about a long construction detour ahead. I had seen signs like that many times before. Usually it meant slower driving and a rough surface, sometimes narrow lanes with cones and barriers. I kept going because I had no choice. The main route was closed, and the detour was the only way through. The sign said it would last for many miles, longer than usual, but I trusted it because truckers do not have many options when the route is marked and official. I followed the arrows and turned onto a side road that looked older and more worn than the highway I had been on. The surface changed from smooth asphalt to a rougher patchwork of cracks and faded lines. The road felt narrower, and the shoulders were almost gone in some places. Trees grew closer to the edge, leaning in like they were squeezing the road. The darkness felt thicker there, and my headlights seemed weaker, like the night was swallowing the light faster than before. I kept going because I had to, but something inside me felt uneasy, like a quiet weight sitting in my chest. After some time on that narrow road, I looked into my mirrors and noticed a pair of headlights in the distance behind me. First, it did not seem strange. Even on empty roads, another vehicle sometimes appears sooner or later. But the way those headlights stayed there bothered me. They kept the same distance for a long time, not getting closer, not falling back, just hanging at the edge of visibility. The road was empty, wide enough in some places for them to pass, but they did not try. They just stayed back, steady and silent, almost like they were watching me. I tried to focus on the road ahead, telling myself it was only another driver going the same way, maybe tired, maybe cautious, maybe just moving at a comfortable pace. But the feeling grew stronger as the miles passed. The air inside the cab felt heavier. Every small sound from the dashboard or trailer felt louder than it should. My hands tightened on the steering wheel without me noticing. I kept checking the mirrors again and again, always seeing the same pair of headlights, steady, patient, refusing to disappear. The road got rougher the deeper I went into the detour. There were long stretches without any signs, no markers, no arrows, no reflective posts at the side. It felt strange because most official detours have frequent signs to guide drivers. Here, mile after mile passed with nothing but cracked pavement and dark trees. The headlights behind me stayed there, always the same distance away, as if whoever was driving matched my every move. I could not hear their engine, but I knew they were there, quiet and slow like a shadow. The night felt colder. I could feel the chill seeping through the glass and into the cab, spreading slowly through the air. I noticed how alone I really was out there. No towns nearby, no farms with lights in the windows, no other trucks or cars passing. Just me, the dark road, and that silent vehicle behind me. My mind started replaying every story I had ever heard from other truckers about strange things happening on lonely highways. Not supernatural things, but real things, bad people, criminals, people who wait for someone far from help. I watched the fuel gauge and felt uneasy because I still had a long way to go before the next stop. The detour signs had promised a return to the main road eventually, but the miles kept stretching on and nothing changed. The pavement grew worse with deep patches that made the truck shake. The trailer rattled, and I could feel every bump travel up through the seat into my back. The road felt like it had not been maintained in years, which made me wonder why a major detour would use it. The headlights behind me moved closer for a moment, then fell back again, like the other driver was testing my reaction. I felt my heart beat harder. I kept both hands tight on the wheel, my eyes glued to the mirrors and the road. There was no conversation, no human voice anywhere, only the sound of the engine, the tires, and my own breathing inside the cab. My thoughts began to break into small, sharp pieces, each one filled with worry. I thought about how far I was from help, how long it would take anyone to reach me if something went wrong. After more miles, the road narrowed even more and started to bend through low hills and patches of thick trees. There were no guardrails, only steep drops on one side in some places and rough ditches on the other. The pavement looked broken near the edges, like it could crumble if a heavy truck drifted too far. I had to stay focused to keep the rig centered. The headlights behind me stayed close now, not tailgating, but near enough that I could see the faint outline of a small dark vehicle. No markings, no visible plates from that distance, nothing to identify it. I slowed down slightly, thinking maybe the driver would pass if they wanted to, but they did not. They slowed too, matching my speed exactly, staying behind me like a shadow glued to my trailer. I felt the fear grow stronger, not sudden or loud, but deep and steady, like cold water rising slowly around my legs. I tried not to panic. I kept telling myself to stay calm, to think, to keep moving forward because stopping on a road like that felt far more dangerous. The trees pressed closer, and the road dipped into a long stretch where no sky was visible above, only branches and black shapes crowding the edges of my headlights. The pavement there looked almost like a forgotten farm road, not like a temporary route for heavy trucks. My mind kept going back to the lack of signs, the rough surface, the strange isolation. A thought formed slowly in my head, heavy and unpleasant. It did not feel like a normal detour anymore. It felt like a trap built by chance and neglect, a place where someone could do something bad and no one would see. The road eventually opened into a wide flat stretch where the trees pulled back a little, and there was a long straight section of cracked asphalt. On the right side, I saw an old pull-off area, maybe an abandoned rest spot or work site, covered in weeds and dirt, with broken concrete and faded paint. There were no lights, no buildings, no signs, only an empty space big enough for a few vehicles. It looked like the kind of place where people might stop if they were desperate or lost. As I drove past it, I noticed how the vehicle behind me drifted slightly toward the shoulder, like the driver was thinking of stopping there or trying to make me stop. I felt a strong urge not to slow down, not even a little. I kept my speed steady and my eyes alert. The empty rest area slipped past in the darkness and disappeared behind me, but the feeling in my chest stayed heavy. The miles dragged on. My back hurt. My eyes burned. The engine hummed under my feet like a deep, constant drum. The headlights behind me kept following. Never too close, never too far. Just there, stubborn and patient. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how unusual it was for a driver to stay locked behind a slow-moving truck for so many miles on an empty road. It did not feel random anymore. It felt intentional. After what felt like an endless stretch of road, I saw something ahead in the faint glow of my high beams. A large object lay across part of the pavement, low and dark, almost invisible until I was close. It looked like a fallen tree branch or maybe debris from old roadwork. I slowed down carefully, gripping the wheel with both hands while the trailer shifted slightly behind me. The object stretched almost across the whole lane, leaving a narrow space near the edge. I scanned the sides of the road and the mirrors while my truck rolled forward. The vehicle behind me slowed too, staying close, hovering there in the dark. The object on the pavement looked placed, not random, not scattered like something that fell by accident. It rested in a straight line, almost like it was meant to block someone, maybe not completely, but enough to force them to slow down or stop. I felt fear push harder into my chest. I knew I could not stop there. Stopping meant sitting in darkness with a stranger behind me and no help anywhere nearby. I had to keep moving. I lined up the truck and tried to angle the wheels toward the narrow gap near the shoulder. The broken pavement crumbled at the edge, and I could feel the weight of the trailer pulling slightly as I guided the truck past the obstruction. The tires rolled over rough gravel and small stones, and the entire vehicle shook, but I made it through without stopping. As soon as I cleared the debris, I checked my mirror. The vehicle behind me slowed near the object and stopped briefly. For a few seconds, it did not move, just sat there with its headlights shining over the road. That moment felt long and tense. Then the vehicle rolled forward slowly again, passed over or around the obstruction, and continued following me. It stayed behind me like nothing had changed. That told me everything I needed to know. The object was never a problem for them. It had been a problem meant for me. My heart pounded harder. The world outside felt even darker now, like the night had thickened around everything. The road curved through more low hills, and in some places, I could see sections of broken guardrail where accidents had happened in the past. The shoulders were soft and uneven, and deep ditches waited just inches away from the wheels. I realized how easily a truck could be forced off a road like that, how quickly it could roll or slide, how long it would take anyone to find it. I began to notice small details I had missed before. Faint skid marks on the pavement in places where the road narrowed. Broken glass near the edges. Old tire tracks leading into the dirt and stopping near low bushes and trees. It looked like vehicles had lost control there many times, but I wondered how many of those losses had been accidents and how many had been something else. The thought made my skin crawl. I kept driving mile after mile, trying to maintain steady control, trying not to show any weakness in my movements, even though no one could see my face or my hands. My breathing was slow and tight. My chest felt heavy, and my arms ached from holding the wheel so firm. I could feel sweat on my palms even though the air in the cab was cold. Fear did not explode. It just settled deeper and deeper inside me, slow and quiet like a weight pressing down. Every so often, the vehicle behind me would move slightly to one side, like the driver was testing angles, maybe thinking about pulling up beside me, maybe studying the road, maybe waiting for the perfect place. I imagined all the worst possibilities because the situation left too much empty room for the mind to fill. I thought about how someone could force a truck to slow down enough to corner it, or how they could wait until the road narrowed into a curve over a ditch, then move in at just the right moment. The detour still had not ended. There were no signs telling me I was close to the main highway, no arrows, no reassurance at all. It felt like I had left the normal map and entered some forgotten stretch of road no one cared about anymore. I thought about the people who designed the route, about how far away they were, how little they knew about what was happening out there that night. I thought about how easy it would be for something to happen without anyone knowing until it was too late. Eventually, the terrain opened slightly again, and I saw faint orange light in the distance, not from a town, but from what looked like an old industrial yard or abandoned construction site. There were large rusted containers, broken machinery, and long shadows stretching across crushed gravel. The road passed right beside it. The area looked empty, lifeless, like no one had worked there in years. Fences leaned at strange angles, some sections fallen flat. The chain links rattled lightly in the wind. As I drove past that wide open lot, I felt more exposed than before. The space was large enough for vehicles to pull in and disappear from the road. There were dark corners, piles of metal, and blind spots everywhere. If someone wanted a place to corner a truck without being seen, that yard would have been perfect. The vehicle behind me drifted slightly closer again as we passed, then returned to its usual distance, like the driver had considered something and decided to wait longer. I kept going, and after a long stretch, I finally saw a faint green glow far ahead. It looked like a highway sign, tall and distant, leaning over the road like a thin shape in the dark. My chest tightened, not with fear this time, but with cautious hope. If that sign meant the main highway was ahead, then I might finally reach a place where there would be other vehicles, bright lights, and safe exits. But the fear did not leave because I still had distance to cover before reaching it, and the other vehicle was still behind me. The road leading to the sign dipped and curved in a slow bend with steep ditches on both sides and a rough crumbling surface. It was the kind of spot where one wrong move could shove a truck off the pavement. I knew that if anything happened, this would be the place someone might choose. As I took the curve, I kept the wheel steady, my jaw tight, my heart pounding hard enough that I could feel it in my neck. The vehicle behind me moved closer again, closer than it had been all night. Its headlights filled my mirrors, bright and harsh, washing the inside of the cab with cold light. I could not see the driver. I could only see the shape of the hood, the glare of the lights, the way it hugged my trailer like a shadow that wanted to press forward. I held my line, kept my speed even, refused to brake suddenly, refused to drift. For a few long seconds, the other vehicle stayed right there, hovering at my back, too close for comfort. Then, as the curve finished and the road straightened, the vehicle fell back again, returning to that same strange, comfortable distance, as if the driver had changed their mind or decided to wait just a little longer. The highway sign grew larger ahead. I read the faded letters as they finally came into focus. It told me the main route was half a mile ahead, with an on-ramp to the right. My chest filled with a mixture of fear and determination. I knew that once I reached that ramp, I would no longer be alone in the dark. There would be lights, cameras, stations, and other drivers. I felt like I needed to get there more than anything else in that moment. But I also knew that half a mile on that road could still be dangerous. Half a mile was enough time for something to happen if someone wanted it to. The vehicle behind me moved closer once more as we approached the last stretch before the ramp. It felt like the driver knew what was ahead, like they understood this was the last chance before I reached safety. Their headlights glared bright in my mirrors, flooding the cab with harsh white light that made my eyes sting. The road narrowed slightly before the ramp, with rough shoulders and loose gravel. I stayed centered and steady. I did not brake hard. I did not swerve. I kept my focus on the ramp ahead, the painted lines, the faint glow of larger highway lights in the distance. The other vehicle stayed behind me, close, tense, waiting. As I reached the split in the road where the ramp curved away to the right, I felt every muscle in my body tighten. I guided the truck smoothly onto the ramp, leaning into the curve, feeling the weight of the trailer shift behind me. For one brief second, the other vehicle hovered at the base of the split, almost stopping, like the driver was deciding whether to follow me onto the ramp or continue straight. Then, without warning, the vehicle slowed sharply and remained on the old road, rolling forward slowly into the dark, vanishing around the bend without turning onto the ramp. There were no signals, no sound, nothing but its fading headlights disappearing into the night. It was gone just as suddenly as it had appeared. I followed the ramp up toward the highway. The lights grew brighter. The sound of distant traffic filled the air, low and steady like a deep ocean far away. The pavement became smooth again. Painted lines glowed clean and clear. I merged onto the main road, and other vehicles appeared ahead and behind, normal and calm, unaware of anything strange. Even with that return to normalcy, the fear did not leave right away. It stayed in my chest like a dull echo. My hands still trembled slightly on the wheel. My shoulders hurt from tension. I kept looking into my mirrors again and again, expecting those headlights to return, to find me, to follow me once more, but they never did. The road became just another highway again, full of quiet motion and ordinary sounds. I drove for many more miles that night, thinking about everything that had happened on that detour. I thought about the missing signs, the broken pavement, the debris across the lane, the way that vehicle had matched my speed, stayed behind me, tested my reactions, moved closer in dangerous places, then disappeared when the highway returned. I thought about how easy it would have been for something to go wrong, how the wrong move could have sent me into a ditch, how no one would have known until morning. I had been on the road for many years and I thought I understood long highways, empty nights, and lonely stretches of land better than most people. I always believed that fear was something that happened to weak minds or to people who did not know how the road worked. I used to think that bad stories were mostly made up, but that changed during one delivery run across a desert highway that I still remember in my bones, in my muscles, and in the way my hands shake sometimes when I hold a steering wheel at night. I was hauling a loaded trailer across a long stretch of road that did not have much around it except dry land, broken fences, and miles of dirt that looked the same in every direction. It was late evening when I started that part of the trip, and I felt tired already, but I told myself I would keep going because the road looked empty and simple and I thought I could handle it. The sky had a heavy gray color even though there were no clouds, just dust floating in the air from strong wind that had passed earlier in the afternoon. The road felt narrow even though it was wide, and the white lines on the asphalt looked like they were stretching forever in front of me. I could feel the engine vibrating through the floor, through my legs, up my back, like it was part of my body instead of a machine. I remember the smell of oil and dust inside the cab, mixed with old food wrappers and the faint smell of rubber from the tires. The seat had worn-out fabric that scratched my arm when I moved. The dashboard lights were dull yellow, and the gauges had that soft glow that made everything look more tired than it already was. My eyes felt heavy, but I kept telling myself to stay focused. I had been driving for hours and I had not seen another vehicle in a long time. Only empty road and a wide flat world around me. The land looked endless, like something that did not want anyone to cross it. The air felt dry, and my throat hurt every time I swallowed. As I kept driving, I noticed something strange that I did not understand at first. On the side of the road, far ahead, I saw what looked like skid marks that stretched across the lane and toward the dirt. They were dark and deep, like something had stopped fast or tried to fight against the road. When I got closer, I saw broken glass shining in the dirt, small pieces catching light from my headlights even though the sun had not fully gone down yet. I slowed down a little, not because I wanted to stop, but because my body reacted before my mind understood why. I felt something heavy inside my chest, like pressure from the inside. There was no car there, no sign of a crash anymore, just marks, glass, and a strange feeling that something bad had happened there not long ago. I kept going, but the feeling stayed. The road grew darker as the sun finally disappeared and the sky turned into a deep, empty space. My headlights were the only bright thing anywhere, and they showed me the same repeated stretch of asphalt again and again. I started to feel like time was slowing down and like every mile was longer than it should be. My hands felt numb on the steering wheel, and my shoulders felt stiff. My breathing sounded loud inside the cab, and I became more aware of every sound the truck made. The engine hum, the rattling of loose metal, the faint squeak in the suspension, all of it became sharper in my ears. After some time, I noticed a dim shape far ahead on the side of the road. At first it looked like just another broken sign or maybe a post, but as I got closer, I saw that it was a small abandoned rest pull-off area. It had a cracked concrete pad, a trash bin lying on its side, and a small shelter that looked like it had not been used in years. The area looked old, worn down by wind and heat, like it was slowly being eaten by the land around it. I told myself I would not stop there, because it felt wrong, like a place where time had frozen and nothing good could happen. But as I passed it, I saw something else that made my stomach tighten. There were tire tracks in the dirt, fresh ones, cutting across the dry ground near the edge of the pull-off. They looked recent, not soft, but sharp and deep. That meant someone had been there not long before me, maybe even earlier that same day. Yet there were still no cars on the road, no headlights behind me, no taillights ahead of me. It was like whoever had been there had disappeared. I felt my skin crawl under my shirt as I drove past, and I did not like the way the back of my neck felt, like someone was staring at me from behind even though I knew I was alone in the cab. I kept driving, and the night grew heavier and darker. The air inside the cab felt warmer even though the outside air was cold. I could hear the wind hitting the side of the truck like soft waves, and I noticed the steering wheel pulling slightly to one side as if the wind wanted the truck to drift off the lane. I corrected it again and again, but after a while my arms grew tired. My mind started to drift, and I began thinking about accidents I had heard about, stories other drivers told about long highways, fatigue, and small mistakes that turned into something terrible. I tried to shake those thoughts away, but they stayed in the back of my head like a shadow. Then something changed in the sound of the truck. It was small at first, a faint scraping noise, like metal brushing against something rough. I felt a light vibration under my feet that had not been there earlier. It grew stronger slowly, like it was crawling up through the frame of the truck. My chest tightened again, and my breath came out slower. I watched the gauges, but everything looked normal. The speed, the pressure, the temperature, nothing showed anything wrong. But the noise was real and the vibration was real. I could feel it in the steering wheel now, a soft tremble that made my hands buzz. The road was still empty, and the darkness outside looked thick, like the land had swallowed every sign of life. I thought about stopping to check the truck, but the idea of stepping out into that black, silent world made my stomach twist. The thought of standing on that road with only the sound of wind and my own breathing felt worse than staying inside. So I kept driving, telling myself that I would find a gas station or a better spot to pull over. The vibration grew stronger. The scraping sound changed to something rougher, like grinding. I felt the truck pulling harder to one side, and I knew something was wrong with one of the tires or maybe the axle. My heart began beating faster, not from fear of the mechanical problem, but from the feeling that the night around me was slowly closing in. I finally told myself that I had to stop before something broke completely. I slowed the truck down and moved it to the shoulder, hearing gravel crunch under the tires as I came to a stop. The engine kept idling, and the lights shone ahead into empty space. I sat there for a moment, gripping the wheel, listening to the sound of the engine and the wind. I did not want to step outside, but I had no choice. I grabbed my flashlight and opened the door, and cold air rushed in, carrying dry dust that scratched my throat when I breathed. As soon as I stepped down from the cab, the world felt larger and more silent than I had imagined. The darkness around me looked alive even though nothing moved. I walked toward the back of the truck, feeling gravel under my boots, and the beam from my flashlight cut through the darkness in a narrow cone. The trailer stretched long and silent, and the light reflected on the metal surface. When I reached the rear wheels, I saw the problem. One of the tires was badly damaged, torn in a way that did not look normal. The rubber looked shredded, not like it had blown out from pressure, but like something sharp had cut into it again and again. The edges were uneven and rough. The metal rim had scratches like something hard had scraped along it. I felt heat spread through my chest, not from effort, but from fear. I knelt down and looked closer, and I saw something stuck in the tire, a piece of metal shaped like a jagged strip. It looked like debris from something man-made, not natural, and it was driven deep into the rubber. It did not look like something I could have picked up by accident in the middle of a clean, empty road. It looked placed, like it had been meant for someone's wheels. I looked around at the dark land and empty road, and the silence felt heavier. I realized there could have been traps on the road, small metal pieces left there by someone waiting for drivers to stop in the middle of nowhere with no help around. A cold feeling spread through my stomach when I thought about that. I felt exposed standing there with my back turned to the land and my truck sitting alone on the shoulder. I knew I had to change the tire or at least move the truck further, but I also knew that being outside for too long was dangerous if someone had done this on purpose. I worked fast, my hands shaking as I lifted tools and checked the spare. The ground felt uneven under my feet, and every sound felt loud, even small ones, like the metal tools touching the rim or my breath coming out of my mouth. The air felt still, but I kept feeling like something was near, like the land itself was watching. As I worked, I saw more marks in the dirt near the shoulder. There were footprints, faint but visible, like someone had walked close to where I was standing. They did not look old. The edges were still sharp. They led toward the desert, then disappeared into the dry ground where the wind had brushed the surface smooth again. I felt my heartbeat speeding up, pounding in my chest so hard that I could feel it in my neck. I tried to focus on the tire, but my hands felt clumsy. The silence around me felt wrong. The desert at night is usually filled with small sounds, insects, animals, wind through dry brush. But here there was almost nothing. Just wind in short, weak bursts, and the faint hum of the idling engine. It felt like whoever had walked there had waited for someone like me to stop, and maybe they were still nearby in the darkness, watching me from a place where my flashlight could not reach. I finished replacing the damaged tire enough to move the truck, but I did it with rushed, uneven movements. I climbed back into the cab, breathing hard, and locked the doors. My hands were shaking as I gripped the wheel. I pulled back onto the road and drove slowly, listening for new sounds. The vibration was less now, but the fear stayed inside me like a weight. I felt like I had escaped something, but not completely. The road ahead still looked endless and empty, and I knew I was far away from any town or safe place. As I drove, I kept checking my mirrors, and after some time, I noticed something that made my chest tighten again. Far behind me, almost too far to see clearly, I saw faint headlights on the horizon. They were small at first, like a tiny dot of light, but they grew slowly, like someone was driving in the same direction and catching up. I did not know how long they had been behind me. Maybe they had been sitting somewhere with their lights off and only turned them on after I started moving again. The lights stayed far back at first, not gaining fast, not falling away, just keeping the same distance. It felt intentional, like they wanted me to know they were there but not see who they were. My palms began to sweat as I tightened my grip on the wheel. The road was straight for miles, and there was nowhere to turn off. I felt trapped in motion, with only forward or backward as options. The night felt tighter, like it was closing around the truck. I kept driving, mile after mile, and the lights behind me kept following. My breathing felt shallow, and the muscles in my jaw ached because I was clenching my teeth without noticing. I watched the gas gauge and felt a new fear building. I did not have enough fuel to keep running forever, and there were no signs of a station anywhere. If I ran out of fuel with that car behind me, I would be stopped again in the middle of nowhere with no help and no way to get away. The headlights behind me finally grew larger, and the vehicle came closer, but it still did not pass. It stayed behind me at a steady distance, as if studying me. I could not see inside it. I could only see the light bouncing off the edges of the road. I could feel my heartbeat in my fingertips now. My chest felt tight and heavy, and I could hear my breath louder than the engine. After what felt like an endless stretch of road, I finally saw something ahead. A small service area sign appeared, faded and almost invisible in the darkness. It showed fuel, but the sign looked old, and I did not know if the station was still open or working. But I knew I had no choice. I took the exit, the headlights behind me slowing as well, following me off the highway. The road to the station was narrow and cracked, and when I reached the building, I saw that it was barely functioning. One light above the pump flickered weakly, and the building looked half abandoned. The place felt dead, like it only existed because nobody had shut it down yet. I stopped near the pump, but I did not get out right away. I watched the mirror and saw the other vehicle stop at a distance, its lights still on, facing me but not moving closer. I sat there inside the cab, and I realized something important and frightening. Whoever was in that vehicle did not want fuel. They had followed me there, and they were waiting. Maybe they had been the ones who left metal in the road. Maybe they were waiting for drivers to stop in places like this, where nobody could see what happened. I knew that if I stepped out right then, I might not get back into the truck again. So I made a choice. I decided to leave the fuel station without stepping out. I still had enough fuel to make it further down the road, at least to somewhere less isolated. I pressed the pedal and pulled away from the pump, turning back toward the highway. The other vehicle waited a moment, then followed again. My heart felt heavy, but I stayed calm enough to drive carefully. I drove until I saw brighter lights ahead, a larger town area in the distance, with visible buildings and signs. As I got closer, the other vehicle finally slowed down and turned away, disappearing into a side road before we reached the town. It was like they had only wanted to follow as long as the road was empty and dark. They did not want to be seen by anyone else. When I finally reached the town and parked near a Real fuel station with cameras and people inside, I sat in the cab for a long time, breathing slowly, letting the fear drain out of my body little by little. My shoulders hurt, my hands were stiff, and my chest still felt tight. I realized how close I had been to something bad that night, not because of ghosts or fantasy, but because of real danger from real people who used empty highways and lonely drivers to their advantage. In the end, I finished my delivery the next day, but I did it with a different mind. I understood the road in a new way. I knew that fear on the highway was not just inside stories. It was in the silence, in the traps no one could see from the cab, in the quiet vehicles that followed from far back, in the empty stations where help did not exist. And the ending of that night was clear to me. I survived because I trusted my instincts, because I did not stay in the darkness longer than I had to, and because I chose to drive toward light and people instead of standing still in a place made for trouble. Now, every time I pass a long, lonely stretch of road, I remember that night. I remember the shredded tire, the footprints in the dirt, the silent car that followed with steady headlights, and the feeling of the land watching me while I stood alone beside my truck. I know that what happened was real, and I know how easily it could have ended worse if I had ignored the signs or stayed there too long. That memory stays with me, and it reminds me that the scariest things on the road are not stories or shadows. They are real dangers that hide in silence, waiting for someone who thinks they are alone and safe. I have spent most of my life behind the wheel. I grew up around trucks. My father was a driver before me, and he always said there is a rhythm to it, a pulse you learn if you spend enough nights on the road. You begin to notice the small things, the things most people miss, the subtle changes in tire hum, the way the engine sounds different when something is off, or the way the road looks when you are really paying attention. Over the years, I have driven across almost every state, through endless stretches of highway, city streets, and back roads that barely deserve the name. You get used to solitude. You get used to monotony. But there are nights, certain nights, when the road doesn't feel empty and quiet. It feels alive in a way that sets your teeth on edge. This story begins on one of those nights. It was early December, a time when the cold had already begun to dig into the northern states. I was hauling a load from Houston up to Chicago, a route I had taken dozens of times, and I thought I knew it well. I left late in the afternoon, just as the sun was sinking behind the horizon, a deep red that made the sky look like it was burning. The highway was mostly clear. There were a few other trucks scattered in the distance, the occasional taillight blinking like tiny stars. My rig was full of electronics, expensive units going to a distributor in Illinois, so I made sure everything was strapped down tightly. I checked the brakes, the lights, the tire pressure, all standard pre-trip things I always did, and then I rolled out onto I-45 North. The first few hours were normal. I kept my speed around 65, a little under the limit, as the asphalt glistened wet from an earlier rain. The cab was warm, the heater working perfectly, and I had a thermos of coffee at my side. The road stretched ahead in a straight line, bordered by rows of dark trees that swayed slightly in the wind. I had seen plenty of deer crossing signs along this stretch, and I was careful to keep my eyes peeled. Sometimes, in the quiet of the night, you can hear animals before you see them. A snap of a twig, a rustle of leaves. But on this night, nothing happened for miles. The hum of the engine and the steady rhythm of the tires on asphalt became hypnotic, almost like a lullaby for someone who shouldn't be sleeping. Somewhere around 11 p.m., I reached a stretch of road that I had driven many times, but I noticed something different. The highway seemed darker than usual. The overhead lights were working sporadically, some flickering like they were about to burn out, others completely dark. The trees on either side of the road were dense, leaning over in a way that made the road feel narrower than it was. I remember thinking it looked strange, but I brushed it off, assuming it was just the way the shadows fell. I had been driving for hours by then, my hands gripping the wheel a little tighter than usual. The road had been straight for miles, and then I noticed a small curve ahead. As I approached it, I saw the headlights of a car, or maybe a truck, pulled over on the shoulder. Its lights were flashing, but the vehicle itself was old, beaten down, rust on the doors, and I could see that it was unmanned. I kept my eyes on it, slowing down slightly. My first thought was that someone had broken down, which happens all the time, but something about it made me uneasy. There was no one inside, no movement, and the vehicle didn't seem like it had run out of gas or had a flat tire. It just stood there. I passed it, keeping my eyes in the rearview mirror. For a moment, I thought I saw a shadow move inside the vehicle, but the darkness around it was deep, and it could have been a trick of the light. I shook my head and told myself I was imagining things. I focused back on the road. The wind picked up slightly, rattling the cab. The rain had stopped, but a fine mist hung in the air, making the asphalt slick. I adjusted my wipers and kept driving. I was near the halfway point of my trip, somewhere in the outskirts of East Texas, when the feeling of unease grew stronger. I couldn't explain it exactly, but it was like someone was watching me. I glanced at the side mirrors, the darkness stretching into the woods on both sides, and all I could see were the outlines of trees. The highway stretched ahead like a ribbon of gray, perfectly straight, but the shadows made it feel narrow. I increased my focus, checking my gauges, listening to the hum of the engine. Then I noticed another thing. My truck was drifting slightly to the right. I corrected it, assuming a gust of wind, but the road felt off. The lane lines seemed different, wider than they should be, and the asphalt looked newer in some places and cracked in others. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but I knew this stretch of road well enough to tell something was not normal. I decided to pull into a rest area up ahead, just to clear my head. The rest areas along I-45 are sparse at night, but this one had lights on, and a single fuel pump was working. As I exited the highway, I noticed the truck from before, the one I had passed, was gone. I thought that was good. It meant it probably had moved on or someone had fixed it. I parked near the fuel pump and killed the engine. The silence hit me immediately. Outside, the wind rustled the few bare trees, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote yipped. I got out, stretched my legs, and walked around the cab. Everything looked normal. Tires were fine, brakes were fine. I took a deep breath, and for the first time I felt a little safer. I filled the tank, checked the oil, and went back inside the cab. I started driving again, following the highway signs north. But something happened then that I will never forget. About 20 minutes later, I noticed headlights behind me. A car or SUV following too closely, almost riding my bumper. I didn't panic. That happens sometimes. People tailgate, especially when there is no one else on the road. I slowed slightly, trying to keep my distance from the shoulder. The vehicle stayed behind me. I glanced in the mirror again. The lights were bright, almost blinding in the rearview, but there was no sign of anyone inside. I could see the silhouette of the seats, but the driver's seat seemed empty. I checked again, leaning forward, squinting, and then my stomach turned. The vehicle was moving exactly with me, matching every speed change I made. I tried a few things, slowing down, speeding up, changing lanes slightly, but it remained in lockstep. My chest tightened. I had been on the road for long stretches before, seen reckless drivers, but this was different. There was no erratic behavior, just a constant, deliberate shadow behind me. My mind raced. I thought about radioing the dispatcher, calling 911, but cell service was spotty in that part of the highway. I checked the mirror again. It followed every move I made with a precision that didn't feel human. I gripped the steering wheel harder. My pulse was hammering in my ears. The highway stretched endlessly ahead, lights of distant cities nowhere in sight. Only me and this phantom-tailing vehicle. I remembered the old trucker's trick. Don't panic, keep moving to a safe, well-lit place. I drove with extra caution, my eyes scanning every curve, every shadow, every patch of darkness. I came up on a small bridge over a creek. No lights except for the reflection of my own headlights in the water below. The truck behind me stayed on my tail. Then I noticed something else, the reflection in the windshield. In the side mirror, I caught a glimpse of movement. It wasn't a person. It was mechanical. Something about the shape of the vehicle looked wrong, distorted. Then I realized the taillights didn't match any car I knew. The pattern of red was irregular, almost jagged, as if the lights themselves were broken or mismatched. My stomach turned over. I considered pulling off, but the bridge was narrow. There was no shoulder, and the thought of stopping there made my skin crawl. So I kept driving, hands tight on the wheel, listening to the engine whine as I maintained speed. I prayed for another rest area, a gas station, anything with lights and people. The minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Finally, a sign appeared. Next services, 5 miles. Relief hit me, but it was thin, cautious. The shadow behind me didn't leave. As I approached the service area, I saw the lights of the gas station. A couple of trucks were parked, diesel pumps glowing in the dark. I slowed and pulled into a spot, heart hammering, my hands sweating. The vehicle behind me stopped at the far edge of the lot. I didn't look directly at it, but in the reflection of the cab window I could see it. No driver, nothing inside, just the strange, broken light pattern of its rear lamps. I killed the engine, leaned back, and tried to steady my breathing. I got out, keeping the cab between me and the vehicle. The night air was cold, sharp, the wind biting at my neck. I walked around, pretending to check my rig, but my eyes never left that shadowy car. Then, slowly, almost deliberately, the vehicle backed up onto the highway. It didn't turn its lights off. It didn't stop. It just vanished into the darkness, returning to the road it had followed me on. I watched until it was gone, then finally let myself breathe. The rest of the trip was tense, but uneventful. I drove through the night, arriving in Chicago early the next morning. I pulled into the warehouse, checked my cargo, signed the paperwork, and finally had a chance to sit down. I thought about calling the police about the strange vehicle, but I knew what they would say. Probably a prank, an abandoned car, or your imagination. Maybe they were right. Maybe I would never know what I saw that night. But I remembered every detail. The broken pattern of the tail lights, the precision of its following, the way it appeared and vanished. It wasn't human, at least not entirely. Weeks later, I heard reports on the radio about stolen vehicles being used in automated tailing scams, where criminals would use old cars with remote controls to follow truckers and plan thefts. Clicked. The precision, the empty driver's seat. It wasn't a ghost, it wasn't a trick of my mind. It was someone scouting the road, watching, studying, looking for the right opportunity. I never saw that vehicle again, but I changed my habits. I started using more well-lit rest stops, avoiding isolated stretches at night whenever possible, and always keeping a vigilant eye on mirrors and shadows. That night stayed with me, but in the end, I made it to my destination safely. I didn't panic, I stayed calm, I stayed aware, and I survived. And sometimes that's all you can do on the road. I have spent many years on the road, and I always thought I understood what fear was. I thought fear was bad weather, narrow mountain roads, or a truck that started to shake when you were still far from the next town. But the night I am about to describe showed me a different kind of fear. It was not loud or fast. It was slow, heavy, and quiet. It came from small details, from small mistakes, from the feeling that something around me was wrong, but I could not understand it until it was almost too late. I was alone in my truck, and the road felt endless, and every mile made the air around me feel thicker, like the world itself was closing in. I was hauling a long load of used machinery across several states. It was late fall, the kind of season when the air is dry and cold and the night settles fast. The route took me off the main highways and deep into long stretches of rural road where there were no towns for miles. I liked those roads most of the time because they were quiet and empty, and I could drive for hours without seeing anyone. But they also felt lonely, especially at night, and sometimes that loneliness felt like its own weight inside the cab. I had started the day early and had already been driving for many hours. By the time the sun went down, the world outside turned into a mix of dark fields, shapes of trees, and long straight pavement that seemed to stretch into nothing. My headlights cut through the darkness, but they only showed a small slice of the world ahead of me. Everything else was black and silent. The inside of the truck was quiet except for the steady sound of the engine and the low hum of the tires on the road. My eyes felt tired, but I kept going because I wanted to cover as much distance as possible before stopping. The load I was carrying was heavy, and I could feel the weight pulling at the back of the truck whenever I went up a small hill or slowed down. The straps had been checked, the paperwork was clean, and everything about the job felt normal. That was the part that made what happened later feel even worse. There were no warnings, no signs that this trip would be different. Everything felt ordinary, and that normal feeling made me let my guard down more than I should have. Hours passed, and I noticed that the road signs became less frequent. The road itself felt older, rougher, and narrow. Fewer lights, fewer markers, fewer signs of life. The sky was empty and dark. I kept driving because according to the route, this stretch would connect back to a larger road ahead. I watched the fuel gauge, watched the miles, watched the shadows on the sides of the road. I tried to stay alert by focusing on little details, like the sound of the engine or the feel of the steering wheel under my hands. Then I started noticing something strange with the road. It felt like the shoulder was getting softer, like the edge of the pavement blended into dirt and gravel. The white lines on the sides were faded almost to nothing. The center line was broken and worn. It looked like a road that had not been maintained in a long time. I began to wonder if I had taken a wrong turn somewhere earlier, but I had followed the route exactly as it was written. There was no signal on my phone, and the GPS had frozen several miles back. I kept moving forward because stopping in the middle of nowhere felt worse than continuing. The darkness outside became thicker, and my headlights showed nothing but empty land, dead grass, and long ditches on both sides. The world felt wider and emptier at the same time. The air inside the cab felt stale, and my breathing felt louder than it should have. After some time, I noticed a faint smell. It was hard to describe at first. It did not smell like fuel or burning or anything mechanical. It smelled old, like damp dirt and metal that had been sitting in the weather too long. It slowly grew stronger as I drove, and I began to feel uneasy. The smell seemed to drift in through the vents, and even when I closed them, I could still sense it. It felt like the smell was sticking to the air around me. I saw something ahead in the distance, a faint shape on the side of the road. As I got closer, I realized it was an old truck, maybe another semi, parked crooked near the ditch. Its cab was tilted slightly, and its trailer sat at an odd angle. There were no lights on it, no signs of movement. The paint was faded, and the metal looked worn and rusted. It looked like it had been there for a very long time. I slowed down as I passed it and took a long look. The windows were dark. The tires were flat. The front bumper was bent. I could see marks on the road near it, like old tire scrapes and disturbed gravel. It looked like someone had once tried to move it or had struggled to control it before it ended up where it was. The smell in the air grew stronger as I rolled past it, and I felt an uncomfortable feeling in my chest. I kept driving, but I could not shake the image from my head. I started thinking about what could have happened to that truck. Maybe a mechanical failure, maybe the driver fell asleep, maybe the road was worse back then. I tried to treat it like just another abandoned vehicle on an empty road, but it bothered me. It felt out of place. It felt like a warning left behind by someone else who had already lived through something terrible. As the night went on, the road began to twist slightly. It was still mostly straight, but small curves appeared, and the ground on the sides sloped downward. The ditches looked deeper. The darkness below the road felt heavier, like thick pits waiting for anything that slipped off the pavement. I paid extra attention to the steering, making sure to stay centered, because one wrong move could send the truck sliding into those dark drops. Then I noticed another detail. The road surface was cracked in several places, and there were patches of rough, uneven asphalt. The truck shook more than before, and I could feel every bump through the seat. The vibration made my hands feel numb. My eyes felt strained from staring into the blackness for so long, and my mind started drifting between memories and the present moment. I forced myself to stay focused. Somewhere ahead, I saw another shape on the side of the road. I felt a cold feeling in my stomach when I realized it was another abandoned vehicle. This one was a smaller truck, maybe a box truck, with the back doors bent and open slightly. The body was scraped, and one of the rear wheels was missing, leaving the axle resting near the dirt. Again, no lights, no signs of people, nothing but dark metal and silence. This time, I slowed almost to a crawl as I went past. The same smell filled the air around me, stronger than before. It was like old oil, damp metal, and something rotten mixed together. I could see marks in the dirt beside it, like something had been dragged or had slid there. The whole area around that truck felt wrong, like the land itself had a memory of what happened there. After passing the second abandoned vehicle, my thoughts began to change. I no longer felt like I was just passing random wrecks. It began to feel like I was following a path where trouble had happened again and again. The road felt cursed in a way that had nothing to do with ghosts or stories, but with real accidents, human mistakes, bad design, and neglect. I imagined tired drivers, failing brakes, steering that locked up, fog or rain, or icy nights like the one ahead of me. I imagined how lonely those last minutes must have felt for them, in the same darkness I was in now. The deeper I went, the more the road felt like it was shrinking, even though the width was the same. It felt like the world closing in behind me, like there was no easy way back. My fuel level was still fine, but the miles felt endless, and I had no idea how long the stretch would last. There were no road signs, no mile markers, no signs telling me how far until the next town. It was just darkness, abandonment, and the road that never seemed to end. I started to feel small pains in my back and shoulders from tension. My jaw was tight. My hands were stiff on the steering wheel. Every sound around me felt sharper, like the engine noise had changed tone, even when it had not. I kept glancing into my mirrors, and every time I did, the beam of the taillights behind me only showed more darkness and the vague shapes of the trailer. It felt like I was the only living thing moving through a long dead stretch of land. At some point, the road sloped downward into a shallow valley. The darkness there felt heavier. The air felt colder. The smell that had been hanging around the road grew thicker again. I saw another shadow ahead, but this time it was not parked on the shoulder. It was sitting dead in the middle of the road. As I approached, I realized it was another semi-truck, larger than the others, with its trailer slightly jackknifed. It blocked part of the lane, and the road curved slightly near it, making the approach dangerous. I slowed down even more and carefully moved around it. The front end was smashed in, the windshield cracked, the side panels bent. The trailer doors were closed but dented. There were tracks in the asphalt, dark marks from tires that had locked up at some point in the past. The ground around it looked disturbed, and pieces of broken parts were scattered nearby. Seeing that truck made my chest tighten. 3 abandoned trucks on the same stretch of road, all damaged, all silent, all left behind as if the world had forgotten them. It felt like I was moving through a graveyard made of machines instead of people. I felt an urge to stop and rest, but stopping there felt impossible. The area felt wrong, unsafe, like trouble lived in the air itself. After passing the third wreck, something changed in the way I was thinking. I stopped seeing the road as just a road. I started imagining that every mile ahead was another trap waiting for me. I thought about my own truck, my own tires, my own brakes, my own body. I wondered how close I was to becoming another silent shape on that road, another truck that someone else would pass years later and feel uneasy about. The night grew colder, and the windshield began to fog slightly on the edges. I wiped it and kept going. I thought about sleep, but I knew that if I tried to stop and rest there, I would not be able to relax. The darkness outside felt like it was pressing on the windows, like something heavy was resting on the sides of the truck. My breathing felt shallow and uneven. Then I began to notice something else. The road ahead was not flat anymore. It dipped and rose in uneven waves, like it had slowly shifted over time. The pavement in some sections looked cracked and sunken, like the ground beneath it had weakened. I felt the trailer shift behind me when the road dipped, and I tightened my grip on the wheel. I slowed down, but even at a slower speed, every change in the road felt risky. The smell came back stronger than ever. It was thick, like something rotten mixed with fuel and mud. I realized then that the smell was not random. It came from the area itself. It came from the ground, from the wrecks, from spilled oil and chemicals, from old accidents that had never been fully cleaned. The entire stretch of road felt poisoned by years of disaster and neglect. I looked ahead and saw a small narrow bridge coming up, crossed a dark, dry riverbed or ditch. The guardrails were bent and rusted. The road leading onto the bridge was cracked and narrow. The bridge looked old and weak, and the idea of taking a heavy semi across it made my stomach twist. I eased the truck forward very slowly, keeping it straight, keeping my mind focused on every inch of movement. The bridge creaked under the weight, and the vibration traveled through the steering wheel and into my arms. The sound of metal under stress echoed through the truck. For a moment, I imagined the bridge collapsing, the cab tipping forward, the trailer dragging me down into the dark space below, and the world going still. But the bridge held, and I made it across. I let out a slow breath, but the tension stayed in my body. I realized that fear had taken control of my mind. Not loud panic, but quiet, constant fear that stayed inside every thought. The road beyond the bridge stretched ahead into more darkness. The land around me felt even emptier. I had the strange feeling that I had driven farther into a place that most people avoided. I thought again about the abandoned trucks behind me and wondered how many more might be ahead. As I continued, I noticed that the road curved slightly to the right and then dipped again. At the bottom of the dip, the pavement looked darker, almost like it was wet, but there had been no rain. I slowed even more, and as my headlights washed over it, I saw that the dark patch was oil or some kind of thick residue that had stained the road over time. There were deep grooves in it, tire marks pressed into hardened layers of spilled material. I carefully guided the truck across it, feeling the traction shift for a moment. My heart jumped, but the tires gripped again, and I kept moving. That patch felt like a memory of violence, like the ground itself remembered every accident that had happened there. At that moment, I realized something clear and simple. This road was not dangerous because of superstition or mystery. It was dangerous because it had been forgotten, because it had not been repaired, because it was badly designed, because tired drivers like me were still routed through it late at night with heavy loads and fading awareness. It was dangerous in a real, human way, and that made it colder and scarier than any story. I kept moving forward, mile after mile, until finally, in the far distance, I saw something different. A faint glow in the sky, a change in the darkness. It was the kind of soft light that only comes from towns or highways. Seeing that glow brought a small wave of relief, but I did not relax yet. I knew the road could still hold more danger before I reached safety. The pavement slowly improved. The cracks became fewer. The lines on the road became clearer. The shoulder widened. The air smelled cleaner. The smell that had been heavy around me finally faded. And then, after what felt like forever, I saw a sign. A real, clear sign with reflective paint. It was the first sign I had seen in hours. It pointed toward a main highway ahead. When I finally reached the highway ramp and rolled onto smooth, well-lit pavement, I felt the fear drain slowly from my body. The road felt wide and alive again. Other vehicles passed in the distance. Lights glowed along the sides. The world felt connected again. I kept driving for a while until I reached a rest area. I pulled in and parked the truck. My hands were shaking. My back hurt. My head felt heavy. I sat there for a long time, breathing slowly, thinking about the road behind me. I thought about the wrecked trucks, the broken bridge, the sunken pavement, the smell of old accidents and forgotten places. The ending to that night was not dramatic. Nothing chased me. Nothing supernatural waited for me. The fear came from real things. Neglect, isolation, human error, the weight of machines, the silence of empty roads where no one is there to help if something goes wrong. I understood then how easy it would have been for me to make a small mistake, to become tired for a second, to hit one bad patch of road, and to end up as another abandoned shape left in the darkness. I realized how thin the line is between making it through the night and never leaving that place at all. And that was what stayed with me. Not noise, not shock, but the slow, quiet truth that on some roads, you survive only because nothing went wrong at the wrong moment. That is why I still think about that stretch of road. I think about the darkness, the ruined trucks, the smell, the bridge, the cracked ground, and the long miles of silence. I think about how close I felt to disappearing into that place forever, and how the only reason I did not was because I stayed alert when my body wanted to give up. The ending was clear. I survived, I reached the highway, I parked in a safe place, and I understood what that road really was. It was not haunted by ghosts. It was haunted by mistakes, by time, by weather, by poor design, by broken machines, and by tired people who were just trying to finish their run. And I knew that if I ever saw that route listed again, I would never drive it, no matter how long the detour would be. Because that road did not need monsters or stories to be terrifying. It was already real, and that made it worse than anything my imagination could ever create. I spent most of my adult life on long, empty highways, and I always thought I understood loneliness better than most people. I drove miles of flat land, dark roads, quiet towns, and cold stretches of desert where wind pushed against the trailer like an invisible hand. I used to think the road was simple. You stayed awake, you watched your mirrors, you kept your rig between the lines, and you followed the rules. Over the years, I learned that sometimes the real fear was not about crashes or storms or broken engines. Sometimes the fear came from small, strange things that happened in places where no one else was around, and where help felt very far away. What happened on a run through a long, empty stretch of highway still sits heavy in my mind, and even now, when I think about it, I can feel the same pressure in my chest that I felt that night. The load was simple. It was a normal trailer, nothing special. It was a late run with a tight schedule, and I had to cross a long rural highway that cut through open land, dry fields, and patches of forest. I had been on that road before, but never at that hour and never in that season. The day had been long and hot, and when evening came, the heat left the air slowly and turned into a heavy stillness. The sky darkened and the land became a wide black shape with faint outlines where tree lines and low hills broke the horizon. The engine hummed in a steady rhythm, and my hands rested on the wheel while I watched mile markers pass like quiet reminders of how far I still had to go. There were no street lights on most of that highway. The world outside my windshield was made of only two bright beams of light, cutting forward into the dark, and everything else stayed hidden. The road felt narrow even though it was wide, because the darkness pressed against it on both sides. The edges of the asphalt were rough and faded, and every small rise and dip shook the cab just enough to remind me how alone I was out there. The air in the cab smelled like warm plastic and diesel, and the seat felt stiff against my back after so many hours of sitting. I kept my eyes moving, always watching my mirrors, always checking the road, because I knew deer and other animals sometimes crossed without warning. The sky had no moon that night, just a faint glow of distant clouds that I could barely see. I could feel my body getting tired, but my mind stayed alert because I had been trained to push through late hours when needed. My thoughts drifted in slow waves, thinking about past roads, other nights, the sound of rain on the windshield, and moments when I had slept at rest stops with trucks lined up side by side like metal walls. After midnight, the road grew even emptier. I had not seen another vehicle for a long stretch. No headlights behind me, no lights ahead of me. Just my truck, the engine, the white lines sliding under me, and the dark land stretching on both sides. Sometimes when roads get that empty, I start to feel like I am moving through a world that has paused. Like everything is frozen in place except me and the truck. That feeling is not always scary. Sometimes it is peaceful, but that night it made something inside me feel uneasy, like I was drifting further away from anything familiar. The first strange feeling came when I noticed a faint vibration in the steering wheel. It was small at first, like the road surface had changed, but the pavement looked the same. I kept both hands steady and paid attention. The vibration stayed, not strong enough to be a problem, but different enough to bother my mind. I listened to the sound of the engine, the tires on the road, the faint rattle of loose items in the cab. Everything sounded normal. I told myself it was just bad pavement, but the feeling stayed in the back of my head. The land on both sides of the highway turned into long stretches of forest. The trees were tall and close together, and the darkness between them looked deep and silent. My headlights touched the trunks at the edge of the road for only a moment before they slipped into blackness. The branches above formed shadows that looked like shapes reaching out across the road. The air outside felt colder, and I could see faint mist forming in low patches near the ditches. My chest felt tight, not from fear yet, just from the heavy quiet. Then I saw something on the shoulder far ahead of me. It was only a dark shape at first, sitting low near the white line. I kept my eyes on it, trying to understand what I was seeing. As I got closer, it looked like an abandoned car with no lights on. It sat at an angle, the front end dipped slightly toward the ditch, and the back end closer to the pavement. The paint looked dull and dusty. There was no motion, no sign of anyone inside or around it. I slowed a little, not too much, just enough to pass safely while watching carefully. As I drove by, my headlights slid over the car, and I saw that one of the rear windows was cracked open a small amount. The inside was dark. There were no hazards flashing, no reflective triangles on the road, nothing to warn other drivers. On a normal busy highway, that would have been a serious problem, but here there was no one else. It felt strange to see that car just sitting there in the middle of nowhere, with no sign of why it was left. I checked my mirror as I passed, and the car disappeared into the darkness behind me, swallowed up by the night like it had never been there at all. I kept driving, but the feeling in my chest changed. There was a heavy weight under my ribs, like a slow dread forming without a clear reason. I tried to focus on the road, but my thoughts kept returning to that car. I imagined someone leaving it there, maybe walking into the woods to get help, maybe breaking down hours earlier. But there had been no footprints I could see, no movement, no other light. It felt wrong, like a piece of a story with the middle missing. The vibration in the steering wheel grew stronger. It matched the rhythm of the tires, steady and repeating. I listened closer and felt the truck shifting slightly, like something in the back was moving in a way it shouldn't. My hands tightened on the wheel, and my breathing changed without me meaning for it to. I thought about pulling over, but the shoulder was narrow and the ditches deep, and I knew stopping in the dark with no visibility around me could be more dangerous than continuing to the next wide turnout. I told myself I would check everything as soon as I found a safe spot. The road curved gently, then stretched straight for a long distance. My headlights reached far ahead, showing nothing but faded lines and black trees. The sky above looked empty, and the stars were hidden behind thin clouds. The engine sound echoed inside the cab, bouncing off the glass and plastic surfaces. I could feel sweat forming on my palms even though the air was cool. Then I noticed something else in my mirror. For a long time, the road behind me had been empty, but now I thought I could see a faint reflection far back. It was so small and dim that I wasn't sure if it was real. It looked like a distant headlight, but it flickered in a strange way. I stared at it again between glances at the road ahead, trying to understand. The light stayed small and did not seem to grow closer. It hovered there, far back, like it was following me at the exact same speed, always keeping the same distance. I felt a chill go through my arms and shoulders. I could not hear anything outside the truck, but I imagined the empty road stretching back for miles, and that tiny light sitting there like an eye that refused to blink. I tried to tell myself it might be a motorcycle far off or a car coming over distant hills that made the light rise and fall. But something about how steady it stayed made my stomach tighten. The vibration in the wheel suddenly turned sharper, and I felt the entire truck shift slightly to the side. The trailer tugged at the cab for a second, just enough to make my heart jump. I slowed down more, keeping control, feeling every movement like a pulse. I imagined the load inside shifting, straps loosening, weight moving where it should not be. I pictured what would happen if the trailer tipped even a little at that speed, how the whole rig could slide, how metal and glass could twist in seconds. I searched the side of the road ahead for a wide gravel area or turnout. After a while, I saw a faded sign, old and cracked, warning of a small rest pull-off area ahead. It was not a proper rest stop, just a dirt clearing on the side of the road used by maintenance crews sometimes. It looked dark and rough, but I knew I needed to stop before something went wrong. As I approached the pull-off, I looked again in the mirror. The distant light was still there, the same faint shape, the same distance. It had not moved closer or farther. It stayed in the exact same spot behind me like it was tied to my truck by an invisible rope. My chest tightened again, and my breathing felt shallow. I guided the truck slowly into the pull-off area. The ground was uneven, a mix of gravel and dirt, with weeds growing through it. The trees around the clearing were tall and dense, and their tops rocked gently in the cold night breeze. The headlights lit up a rough patch of ground in front of me, and the rest of the clearing remained swallowed in darkness. I brought the truck to a full stop, feeling the trailer settle behind me with a dull, heavy motion. I turned on the hazards, and the clicking sound filled the cab, steady and slow. The air suddenly felt too quiet outside that sound. I sat there for a moment, breathing, feeling my heart beat fast in my chest. I checked the mirrors again. The faint light on the road behind me was gone. The highway looked empty again, like nothing had been there at all. I stared at the darkness for a long time, waiting to see if the light would return, but it didn't. I stepped out of the cab and the cold night air hit my face. The smell of dirt, oil, and damp leaves filled my nose. The sound of the hazards echoed against the trees, each blink sending a faint orange glow across the side of the trailer. The ground crunched under my boots as I walked along the length of the truck, running my hand along the metal as I went, feeling the cold surface beneath my fingers like a guide in the dark. I checked the tires one by one, touching the rubber, feeling the heat, listening for leaks. I inspected the axles, the mud flaps, the landing gear. Everything looked normal. The straps and locks on the trailer doors were tight. There was no sign of damage or movement. The vibration I had felt earlier made no sense now, because nothing seemed wrong. The stillness around me felt thick and heavy, and the trees watched silently from the edge of the clearing like tall shadows. I reached the back of the trailer and looked at the reflective striping glowing in the hazard lights. The metal doors stood cold and solid. The padlock looked secure. I stood there for a long moment, feeling small in that empty space, alone in the middle of nowhere with only the blinking light and the sound of my own breathing. Then I noticed something on the dirt near the back of the trailer. The ground was uneven and covered with tire marks and rocks, but there was a clear, disturbed area, like something had been dragged across the surface. It wasn't big, but it was noticeable. A faint, narrow line curved from the edge of the clearing toward the back corner of my trailer. The dirt was scuffed, not deep, but enough to show a trail. It looked fresh, like it had been made recently. My chest tightened again. I followed the faint line with my eyes. It disappeared into the darkness beyond the clearing, toward the tree line. I stared at the trees, but I could not see anything past the first row of trunks. The night inside that forest looked thicker than the night on the highway. I felt a cold sensation crawl across my skin like static. I walked slowly around the trailer one more time, making sure everything was still locked and tight. My hands felt shaky, and my breath came out in small clouds in the cold air. I could hear faint rustling sounds from the woods, maybe animals, maybe wind, but every sound felt sharper and closer than it should have been. My mind kept repeating the same thought. Something had been here. I climbed back into the cab and closed the door, and the inside of the truck felt like a small shelter against the giant dark world outside. The smell of diesel and worn fabric wrapped around me, and the seat creaked as I settled into it. I turned off the hazards and sat there for a moment, listening to the silence. The engine was still idling, and the vibrations through the floor felt steady again, like nothing had ever been wrong. I checked my mirrors one more time before pulling out. The highway behind me was empty, just a long black ribbon stretching into darkness. The forest around the clearing looked motionless. I eased the truck back onto the road and continued the drive, but the feeling inside me did not fade. If anything, it grew heavier. For the next several miles, the vibration did not return. The steering wheel felt solid, and the trailer followed smoothly. The road stayed empty, and the trees continued to stand tall and silent on both sides. But inside my head, every thought felt tight and sharp. I kept seeing that faint drag line in the dirt, that strange still car, that distant light that had vanished the moment I stopped. After a long stretch, the forest ended and the land opened into wide fields and low hills. The sky above grew slightly brighter from distant towns far away, but the road itself stayed empty. I started to feel a new kind of tiredness, not the usual physical tiredness from long driving, but a deep mental weariness from the feeling of being watched even though I was alone. Hours later, just before dawn, I reached a small way station and rest area that stayed open all night. The lights there were harsh and bright compared to the dark road. The concrete was smooth, painted lines clear, and other trucks sat parked in neat rows like sleeping animals. The sight of them made me feel a little safer. I pulled into a spot, turned off the engine, and listened as the truck settled into silence. I stepped out and stretched my back, feeling the stiffness in my legs and shoulders. The air smelled like exhaust and cold morning dew. I walked around the truck one more time in the bright lights of the lot. I wanted to see everything clearly now, no shadows, no darkness hiding details. I checked every latch, every tire, every edge of metal. Everything looked normal, untouched, as if the events of the night had been nothing but a strange dream. But when I walked to the back of the trailer, I noticed something I had not seen before. Near the bottom edge of one of the doors, right above the latch, there were faint scratches in the metal. They were small, narrow, and thin, but they cut through the dirt and dust and exposed fresh silver beneath. The scratches were short, curved in odd directions, not straight like damage from road debris. They looked like marks made by something pressing, slipping, trying to grip smooth metal. My stomach felt heavy again as I stared at the scratches. They were too low to be from tree branches, too random to be from tools, and too fresh to have been there long. I reached out and touched them with my fingers. The edges of the scratches felt rough and sharp, like they had been made recently, not worn down by time or weather. I stood there for a long moment under the bright lights, feeling cold even though there was no wind. I thought about the car on the shoulder, the faint light behind me, the drag mark in the dirt, and the strange vibration that had come and gone. Each part of the night felt like a piece of a puzzle that I could not fully see. Something had been near my truck. Something had moved close enough to leave marks and disturb the ground, close enough to make me feel its presence even though I never saw it. I never figured out exactly what happened that night. No one else reported anything on that stretch of highway. No missing persons notices that matched the car I saw. No accidents. No news. It was as if the night swallowed every trace except the scratches on my trailer and the memory buried inside me. I finished my delivery after sunrise, handed off the paperwork, and tried to push the night out of my mind. But even now, when I drive empty roads in the dark, and the trees close in on both sides, and the world grows silent except for the hum of the engine, I still think about that stretch of highway, that abandoned car, that distant light that followed me and vanished, and those strange marks in the metal. I think about how close something unknown came to me while I stood alone in the dark, and how easily it left without a sound, leaving only small signs that anything had been there at all. The ending is simple, and it stays with me every time I get behind the wheel. Out there on the road, far from towns and people and lights, the world is full of places where something can stand just beyond the line of your headlights, close enough to touch your truck, close enough to leave marks, and still remain unseen. And when the night is quiet and the road is empty, I remember that feeling, and I understand that sometimes the scariest things are not the things you can see, but the things that leave just enough evidence to remind you that you were not as alone as you thought. I have spent most of my adult life on the road, moving loads from one state to another, spending more nights in a truck cab than in any house. I always thought I understood loneliness, darkness, long highways, and empty rest stops. But the night I am going to talk about changed the way I look at every mile of road I drive now. It was not about ghosts or monsters or stories that people make up to scare each other. It was about real fear, the kind that grows slowly in the back of your head, step by step, until you start to feel like the road is trying to swallow you whole, and there is nothing magical about it. Only real danger and the quiet weight of being alone in a place where nobody knows where you are. I was hauling a refrigerated trailer across a long stretch of highway that cut through wide empty land, fields and trees fading into darkness on both sides. It was late at night, deep night, the kind of time when most people are sleeping in warm homes while truckers like me keep moving forward, mile after mile, trying to make delivery times. The sky was black with only thin, weak stars above the windshield. The air outside was cold, and the yellow lines on the road kept sliding under the hood of the truck like an endless ribbon. The cab smelled like coffee, diesel, and the kind of stale air that comes from sitting inside a vehicle for too many hours. I had been driving since late afternoon with only a short break to stretch my legs. My body felt heavy, my shoulders tight, my eyes tired but still focused. I knew the signs of fatigue well, the slow blink, the little blur at the edge of vision, the way the mind drifts toward thoughts that do not belong on the road. But I pushed forward because the delivery window was strict, and I wanted to reach at least a certain marker before stopping. The road was nearly empty. Sometimes another truck passed by in the opposite lane, its headlights washing across my cab like a brief burst of white light that vanished as fast as it appeared. After that, the darkness settled again, thicker each time. The deeper I drove into that stretch of land, the more isolated I felt. The radio had weak reception, so there was mostly static. The only sound was the steady hum of the engine, the vibration through the floor, the soft rattle of loose objects in the side compartments, and the faint whine of wind pushing against the mirrors. There were no towns nearby, no bright signs, no open gas stations, just one long ribbon of asphalt cutting through quiet land. I kept noticing how the road looked different there. The shoulders were narrow, the white lines cracked and faded. The trees leaned closer to the edge, almost touching the road. The air smelled damp, like dirt and old leaves. There were patches where fog sat low to the ground, sliding over the pavement so gently that it looked like thin white smoke drifting. I felt a slight chill, but not the kind that comes from cold weather. It was the kind that grows when your instincts whisper that something about your surroundings does not feel right, even if you cannot explain why. Hours passed slowly, and I reached a point where the fatigue started to hit harder. My hands pressed firmer on the steering wheel. My back hurt from sitting. My head felt heavier, and I kept rolling my shoulders to stay awake. I knew I needed to find a place to pull over soon, even just to rest my eyes for a short while. I scanned the signs along the road, hoping for a rest area or a small truck stop, anything with a wide enough space to park safely. After a long stretch of nothing, I finally saw a small reflective sign on the right side of the road that showed the shape of a bench and a tree, the symbol for a rest area. It was old and worn, half bent, with rust creeping along the edges. There were no bright lights near it, no gas station, no store, just a small arrow pointing toward a narrow road that disappeared into darkness off the main highway. I hesitated for a moment, but the tiredness pressed hard enough that I decided to take it. I turned the wheel and guided the truck onto the side road. The pavement there was rough, with cracks that made the truck bounce slightly. The headlights cut through the darkness and showed a small lot ahead, uneven asphalt with faded parking lines. There were no other vehicles, no cars, no trucks, no signs of movement. Just an empty lot surrounded by tall trees that blocked the horizon. The branches stood still in the cold night, hanging like dark shapes against the sky. The lights that should have been there in most rest areas were either broken or weak. Only one dim lamp stood at the far edge, flickering slowly like it was struggling to stay alive. I parked near the edge of the lot, away from the broken lamp but close enough that I could still see its faint glow. I turned off the engine, and the sudden silence made the air feel heavier. The world outside the cab seemed too quiet, like the land had swallowed all sound. The only noise left was the ticking metal as the engine cooled and the faint rustle of wind sliding through the trees. I leaned back in my seat and closed my eyes for a moment, trying to relax my body. But I never fully sleep when I park in an unfamiliar place, especially one that looks abandoned. My mind stays half awake, listening, waiting, staying alert in case something feels wrong. I rested like that, breathing slowly, feeling the cold air outside pressing against the windows, the darkness around me like a thick blanket that covered everything. After some time, I started to feel uneasy. There was no reason at first. It was just a slow change inside me, like a small knot forming in my stomach. I opened my eyes and looked around through the windshield. Everything looked the same as before. Empty lot, broken pavement, trees standing still. But the feeling did not go away. Instead, it grew. I could not shake the sense that I was being watched. There was no sound, no movement, nothing I could point to. But I have spent so many nights alone in places like this that I have learned to trust that quiet instinct. I sat still and scanned the lot slowly, moving my eyes without moving my head. I looked at the tree line, the shadows near the edge, the spaces between the branches where darkness clung like wet cloth. I stared long enough for my eyes to adjust more to the faint light. That was when I noticed something that made my chest tighten. Near the far corner of the lot, just beyond the flickering lamp, there was a dark shape on the ground. At first I thought it was just a pile of trash or a fallen branch, something left there long ago. But as my eyes adjusted more, I saw that it was not random. It looked like an object someone had left there intentionally. It was long, narrow, and uneven, like something wrapped inside an old blanket or tarp. The shape lay still, half hidden near the bushes. I kept staring at it, waiting to see if it moved, trying to figure out what it was. The flickering lamp cast weak light over it every few seconds, just enough to show its outline and then swallow it again in darkness. The longer I looked at it, the more wrong it felt. Something about where it was placed, how it rested against the edge of the lot, how still it was. I felt tension crawling into my shoulders and neck. My breathing grew slower, heavier. My hands rested on my legs, but my muscles were tight. I wanted to tell myself it was just debris, maybe an old sleeping bag someone threw away, but my mind would not accept that explanation. The quiet weight of the place, the silence, the empty lot, everything combined into something that felt more threatening than anything I had felt on a road before. I turned my head slowly toward the side mirror to check the area behind my trailer. The reflection showed only darkness and the faint glow of the weak lamp. Nothing moved, but I still felt the same cold sensation in my chest. I knew that if something happened in a place like this, nobody would see it, nobody would hear it, and help would take a long time to arrive. I thought about starting the engine and leaving right away, but at the same time, curiosity held me in place. I kept telling myself that I was a grown man who had spent years on the road, and that fear should not control me like that. I stayed still, just sitting there, watching, listening, breathing slow and controlled. Minutes passed, maybe more, but it felt much longer. Then I noticed something new. There were faint marks on the pavement near the shape, thin lines that ran from the edge of the lot toward the darker area between the trees. They looked like dragging marks, long curved streaks on the old asphalt. They were almost invisible at first, but once I saw them, I could not unsee them. They led away from the shape like something had been pulled there. The air inside the cab felt tighter. I could feel my heartbeat inside my chest, slow but heavy, every beat loud in the silence. I felt exposed, even though I was inside a locked truck. The window glass suddenly felt thinner, the doors weaker, the darkness around the lot deeper. I knew I should leave. Every instinct in my body was pushing me to start the engine and drive away from that place and never look back. But I also knew that if I drove away without understanding what I had seen, it would stay inside my head forever. So I stayed there, sitting in that heavy silence, thinking, watching, waiting. After a while, I noticed another detail that made everything worse. The shape on the ground was not just still. It looked slightly uneven in a way that reminded me of a human form under a cover. Broad at one end, narrower at the other, the outline too familiar to ignore. My throat felt dry. The marks on the pavement made even more sense now, and that made the fear sharper, heavier, almost physical. I stayed completely still, afraid to move, afraid to make any sound. I listened for anything. Footsteps, rustling, breathing, anything that would tell me someone else was there. But the silence around the lot was absolute. That silence made it worse, because sometimes silence means something is hiding. Time passed in slow, heavy minutes that felt like hours. My muscles hurt from sitting so rigid. My scalp tingled. I could not look away from the shape, but I also did not want to get closer, and I did not want to leave. I was trapped between fear and caution, sitting in a dark lot with my body tense and my thoughts turning slow and heavy like thick liquid. Then I noticed something else that I had missed before. Near the tree line, just beyond the last bit of broken pavement, there was another shape, smaller and darker, barely visible unless you looked directly at it. It looked like a person crouching low or sitting close to the ground, but so still that at first it blended completely into the shadows. Once I saw it, I felt a sharp coldness inside my chest, like the air had turned to ice. I could not tell if it really was a person or just another object, but my mind immediately assumed the worst. I locked my doors even though they were already locked. My fingers trembled slightly as I checked the handle again. The small shape near the trees did not move, but I felt sure that whatever had happened there, it was not safe anymore, if it ever had been. I sat like that for a long time, afraid to start the engine because the sound might draw attention, afraid to stay because every second felt like I was sitting inside a trap. My body was frozen between action and stillness. My breathing was slow, steady, forced because I did not want to panic. Panic on the road gets people killed. At some point, I decided that leaving was the only real choice I had. I slowly reached for the ignition, moving as quietly as I could, even though I knew nobody should be able to hear me inside the cab. My hand shook slightly as I turned the key. The engine roared to life in the silence. The sound cut through the night like a blade. The vibrations rushed back through the floor. The sudden noise made the entire lot feel different, like I had broken something fragile. The flickering lamp kept glowing faintly, and the darkness around the edges of the lot remained heavy. The moment the engine started, the small shape near the tree line shifted. It was not a big movement, just a slight change, a faint adjustment, but it was enough. The shape straightened a little, rising from the ground into a taller outline, no longer blending into the bushes. My heart pounded harder, and a cold wave washed through my body from my chest to my hands. I did not wait for anything else. I shifted into gear, turned the wheel slowly, and guided the truck back toward the exit. My eyes stayed locked on the darkness ahead, but part of my vision held the corner of the lot where the shape had moved. I did not want to see more, but I did not want to look away either. The truck rolled forward over the cracked pavement with a slow, heavy sound. As I reached the edge of the lot and turned back onto the narrow side road, I caught one last brief glimpse in the side mirror. The faint reflection showed the small shape standing near where it had been crouching, tall and still, facing toward the spot where my truck had been parked. The long, wrapped shape on the ground stayed motionless near the corner of the lot. I turned onto the main highway and pressed the accelerator, my hands tight on the wheel, my breathing heavy and slow. The darkness swallowed the rest area behind me, leaving only the road ahead, long and empty again. But the fear did not leave with it. It stayed inside my chest, sharp and cold. I kept driving for many miles after that, even though I was tired. The thought of stopping anywhere near that stretch of road was impossible now. Every shadow beside the highway looked sharper, every tree line heavier, every empty lot threatening in a way I had never felt before. The road that once felt like a familiar partner in my life now felt like a thin line stretched across a quiet world full of places like that empty lot. Places where terrible things can happen quietly, unseen, unnoticed. Hours later, I finally reached a bigger, well-lit truck stop. The bright lights, the sound of engines, the smell of fuel, the sight of other drivers walking around. Everything felt strangely unreal after the silence of that small lot. I parked the truck, turned off the engine, and sat there breathing slowly, hands still shaking slightly, mind trying to process everything I had seen. I thought about what might have been inside that wrapped shape, what those drag marks meant, why someone would be there that late at night, hiding near the trees, waiting, watching. I thought about how easy it is for people to disappear in places like that, far from towns, far from anyone who might ask questions. I thought about how long I had sat there, unknowingly parked beside something that did not belong in any normal rest area. I did not call anyone. I did not report it. I told myself that maybe it was just trash. Maybe I imagined the shape moving. Maybe fatigue made everything look worse than it was. But deep down, I knew what I saw. I knew how my instincts had reacted. I knew that the fear I felt was real and grounded, not a trick of the mind. The ending is simple and heavy and real. I left that place and finished my delivery the next day, but I was not the same driver anymore. Every time I pass an old rest area now, every time I see an empty lot surrounded by trees, every time I notice something lying on the ground that does not belong there, I remember that night. I remember the silent shape near the trees, the wrapped object on the pavement, the marks that led into the darkness, and the way fear crept slowly through my body until it became something solid and undeniable. There were no ghosts that night, no fantasy, no strange creatures. There was only loneliness, danger, and the quiet reality that sometimes the scariest things on the road are not things you imagine, but things that are truly there, hidden in the dark corners of places nobody watches. And now, every mile I drive, I carry that memory with me, a reminder that the road is not just long and empty. It is also full of shadows where real fear can live, waiting for someone tired and alone to stop in the wrong place at the wrong time.